every time I talk to the best angel investors, they're saying like, I'm reading constantly. This is the niche that I'm super excited to read Google alerts on. I always check out what's new, what's upcoming, who are the new players. So this really should be a area where you're excited about. Otherwise, there's not really a point in it. We're going to talk about the due diligence process, the various investing platforms that you can explore just to get a pulse of what's going on in the startup ecosystem, what kinds of companies are investing on these platforms. And you can also look at some of the research there. And then finally, the community aspect of it. How do you source deals? So to start, the due diligence process. This is something that so many people have challenges with, and there's many, many different frameworks. And every investor needs to have their own personalized framework for evaluating investment opportunities. Oftentimes, and we hear this, and if you've listened to the Confident Investor podcast, it's often about these first impressions and instincts when it comes to the founder and team, but you should always back that up with the systems and processes of evaluating startups before investing your money. This thing that we call the sniff test, at the end of the day, we hear a lot of times people say, we're investing in the jockey and not the horse. And what that means is that we're investing in the founder, we're investing in the team. If you don't like the team, it's not going to pass the sniff test. If there's something that just feels a little off, I always recommend you go back and do that due diligence and ask some more questions. It never hurts to ask more questions when it comes to finally making that first investment. So the framework that I always use, high level, is something called the 4 T's when I'm evaluating a startup deal. And these 4 T's are team, traction, tech, and terms. So when it comes to the team, founders are the most critical component to a startup's success or failure. And their prior career and industry experience should add up to a set of skills that help them execute their idea, build a team, and inspire customers, colleagues, and investors. So one great question to always ask founders is, why are you working on this problem out of all the billions of problems that you could be working on in the world? Why this problem? Why this mission? And so that's why a lot of angel investors spend a lot of time thinking about the backstory. So for example, someone's working on a digital health startup, someone I was talking to the other day, it's to help the elderly get healthcare at a more efficient way with a user interface that is actually accessible and usable for the elderly population. And when I asked her, why is it that you're working on this? She told me this incredible story about her grandma and her grandpa and the lack of efficient healthcare that they had available to them in India, and how she was using this app to solve it. But you can hear the passion in the voice. And even if you don't have direct access to the founder, you can see that story on their deck. You should kind of be able to see it in their website if you have that up. And then usually on these platforms, there's always a video as well. So you can at least evaluate and see, okay, how do I feel? What's that sniff test? Do I really believe that this founder is the one, the best person in the world to be solving this company? The second thing is traction. So traction is really important. And there's 2 different ways we talk about B2C companies versus B2B companies. So B2C companies are consumer-focused startups, and the best traction numbers to look at are a passionate and engaged user base. So you should look at things like, what is their user acquisition numbers? When people join their company, they become a user of the app. How long do they stay for? How much are they paying? Are they renewing their membership? So these are all traction numbers that startups would provide in their deck. And then for enterprise companies, the B2B SaaS software companies, they're selling into companies. They usually should have a robust client pipeline and actual revenue. Meaning, if I'm a B2B SaaS startup and I was able to get a 6-figure contract from a big corporation like Procter and Gamble, or Google, and I said, this is a corporation that we are putting through our first pilot as an early stage B2B company, that's a really good sign of traction, because when it comes to B2B client acquisition, those sales cycles are much longer. So whereas for consumer-based startups, B2C companies, we're looking for a significant number of users or significant number of user retention. And then for B2B companies, we're looking at, do they have significant pilot customers who are already in the door for early stage companies? The third thing to look at is technology. So the entire point of high growth startups is that they are leveraging scalable technology in order to grow. So once you're convinced of a startup's value, you should really start evaluating their strategy for building a solid tech product. So this includes their product roadmap, their back-end tech stack, and more. And their technology should also have a leg up on the competition and create a high barrier of entry. So what that means is it's difficult to replicate. What is their unique competitive edge that they have over other startups? And that's why, there are some people who really like consumer companies, and they say, we're creating this product, we're creating this new bag, we're creating this new, XYZ. And that's, for some people, they love consumer startups. And that is one aspect. Angel investors really like that. When it comes to VCs, we're really looking at technology, because technology is the one that has a high barrier of entry. But remember, again, if you don't understand it, I would not right away go into it. Start with your niche. For example, I don't know too much about biotech. So even though I've seen some really cool biotech companies, I haven't yet pulled the trigger on those until I feel comfortable really understanding, at least on a high level, how they differ from their competitors. And then finally is terms. What's central to evaluating the financing terms is understanding which instrument the company is using to raise money on, the company's valuation, and how your investment or your ownership could make you a cash return in the future. So this is something that is much more complex, but at a high level, startups all have a valuation cap that they're raising on, and they're raising on a certain dollar amount. So for example, if a startup is raising $1 million on a $5 million capitalization versus a company that's raising $1 million on a $10 million capitalization. As a startup investor, it makes you get more equity ownership when they're raising on a lower valuation, because you're getting more of that equity, and you're more diluted if they have a higher capitalization. So if you're looking at a company who had a $5 million valuation raising $1 million versus a $10 million, you would get more ownership if that company is raising on the $5 million cap, because you're more diluted the higher the capitalization is. And here are just some additional questions to ask yourself and the company before you pull the trigger on any of your investments. What is the proposed return on investment? So oftentimes we'll ask companies, and they usually should have this in their deck, what is your exit strategy? What is your proposed ROI, your return on investment for investors? And that's, again, the promise to investors. What is their timeline? What are the milestones that they're going to hit? Evaluating these and asking yourself, are these milestones reasonable? Or are they a stretch? Do I believe that the team has the capability to hit these milestones? What are the values of the founder, the team, and the company as a whole? And what are the founder's personal goals? What's their story behind it? We talked about this already. And then what is the time frame for this company's goals? It's good for you to learn about potential exit strategies as different startups. Do they want to IPO? Do they want to be acquired? Of course, a lot of companies do want to be acquired, but if you're saying, well, who do you want to be acquired by? If it's a media company, do they want to be acquired by Disney or ESPN or, any other Comcast? And why do they think that they would be a value add to that greater parent company? So these are also just like really cool intellectual questions and exercises to have for yourself, which is why, again, startup investing is a really, really great community for people who do have that intellectual curiosity. Some investing platforms that I encourage you to just take a look at are things like Republic, WeFunder, Seed Invest, Start Engine. There are more, but these are the equity crowdfunding sites that if you just go on, you can make a free account and you can check out what some of the companies are listed there. They all have different nuances, and it's up to you to really decipher which one you like. And of course, there's going to still be a lot of information there. I don't recommend just going and like randomly making an investment, but what it does is, and I'll show you the action plan, just like high level action steps of what you should do as you think about your niche and then going into these platforms. This is just a few of some of the platforms that you can consider taking a look at if you're curious. And then we get to sourcing deals. The biggest pain that every single investor always talks about is finding deal flow. Where in the world do you find really, really good deal flow? It is hard to find great startup companies and really know, because there's no comparison charts like the stock market. It's not listed anywhere in a really, really organized fashion. There's no real way to sort. And so this is really not a statistical exercise. It is a social exercise. That's why the startup world has traditionally been an old boys club. That's why, because it was part of those small enclosed rooms where people were only able to get the best startup deals. Today, obviously, that has been significantly democratized, but even then, there are a plethora of places to look for, and it's often overwhelming. You can go to conferences, you can go to, syndicates, you can go to these platforms, go to things like product hunts, personal connections. And the most important thing, though, is really need to be finding people that you trust to do this together. As you've seen just from the past hour today, so much of this is being around people who ask great questions and encourage you to think outside of the box. When Travis came to pitch Uber, this whole concept of, hey, you could press a button and a car could show up, most people laughed him out of the room because they said, why would I do that when I'm in New York City and I can raise my hand and hail a cab? It was the people who said, wait a minute, there's something here. There's scalable technology. This is more efficient. Are people still going to be raising their hands and hailing cabs as the primary way of transportation 5-10 years from now? And the people who were smart enough to really think about that and say, we're going to push the boundaries and take a bet here, those are the ones who were able to win big, but they weren't able to do it alone. They were able to do it in a group where they could trust the opinions of other people. And so the question is, how do you know who to trust? What if you don't know anyone who's an angel investor? And this is where the Confident Investor Club comes in. This will be launching in 2021. Right now, we're putting together highly vetted startup deals that are brought in from places like Republic, from Republic Labs, from WeFunder, from some of the top venture capital firms, from Seed Invest. So we have a mix of equity crowdfunding platforms as well as the angel investor groups, the venture capital groups, and we're putting those all together for you each month. You have a private investor community. And we have live Q&A with founders and investors. And of course, invest directly with no minimum investment. And when I say that, I mean, $100 to invest in startups. And really what I am always most excited about is this Q&A with founders and investors, because again, all of the best investors say you can't invest if you don't actually get a chance to really know the founders. So that's really where we have the leg up of bringing in these incredible founders and investors who can walk through the due diligence, who can walk through the trends of what's happening in each of these niches. For the future and how you can think critically about it. So it's a combination of education and network to help you learn how to invest in the next wave of game-changing startups. And what I want to leave you with is this action plan. At a high level, the first thing you need to do is decide how much you will invest. We're at the end of the year, and as you think about the upcoming year and how you are going to allocate your investments to hit your goals, remember that your average investment amount in startups should be 10% of your entire portfolio. That's a 10% rule of thumb. And then divide that 10% by 20. Once you know the dollar amount, go on and pick your niche. I recommend starting with somewhere between 1 and 3. Obviously, focus if you're able to do 1 and commit to it and just make your first investment that you feel comfortable with. That's really where you get started. And I know that some of you have done that already. And that's definitely something to celebrate when you do that first one. And then the third is to create your investment thesis, both the macro and the niche thesis. So the macro thesis, again, is some of those bigger overarching questions around, I believe in 10 years from now, AI will dominate XYZ industry. And that's why I'm really bullish on AI in XYZ. And then the niche specific ones, for example, I know someone who a prominent angel investor is really bullish on cannabis, but in particular in cannabis, she's looking at consumer brands, the ones that will do a really, really good job of branding and dominating across verticals. So that's her niche specific investment thesis. Do your research, ask questions, analyze trends. Becoming an expert, reading. Every time I talk to the best angel investors, they're saying like, I'm reading constantly. This is the niche that I'm super excited to read Google alerts on. I always check out what's new, what's upcoming, who are the new players. So this really should be an area where you're excited about. Otherwise, there's not really a point in it. And then finally, it's about finding your community, finding those other people who are like-minded, ambitious, growth-oriented, who also want to grow their wealth and make a difference in how the world is going to change 10 years from now. So make sure to just get on the Confident Investor Club wait list. We'll have a lot of great updates for you coming up in the new year. And I definitely hope to see you there. It's at confidentinvestor.co/club to get on there. And just don't forget that we are the future. You are the future. The ability to invest in startups is an incredible one that's never been available in the last decade, but now is. And there's only more and more people and better quality startups and greater compliance ability to help us invest in incredible startups that are changing the future. Originally, the cap actually has been $1.1 million, meaning non-accredited angel investors were able to invest in startups up to 1.1 million. But as of next year, startups can raise $5 million, almost 5 times that amount from people just like you, which means that only more high quality startups are going to be joining the equity crowdfunding trend and allowing people like you to invest and grow alongside with them.